All right, so today we are covering experimental and theoretical probability. So experimental and theoretical probability is today's topic. Experimental and theoretical. So theoretical probability is the probability that should happen. So theoretical is what should happen. So if you have a coin, what percent of times should you get heads? Okay, theoretically it should be 50-50. Okay? All right. Should be 50-50, correct? Yeah. The experimental probability is if you flip a coin, maybe you flip it 10 times. Okay, so if I flip it once, I got heads. Twice, I got tails. Heads. Heads. So I have 3 heads, 1 tails, 4 heads, 1 tails, 5 heads, 1 tails, 5 heads, 2 tails, 6 heads, 2 tails, 7 heads, 2 tails, 8 heads, 2 tails. Oh, I should have stopped there. So 8 heads, 2 tails, right? So my experimental probability was 20% tails, 80% heads, right? And so theoretical is what should happen. Experimental is what actually does happen. Okay, so theoretical is what should happen. And so that was the 50%. Okay, it should be 50-50. Experimental is what actually happened when I did my experiment. Which was, I think I got 80% heads. Okay? So, that's theoretical and experimental. If you compare it to science, isn't that kind of like your hypothesis and your conclusion in science? Your hypothesis is what you think should happen. Your conclusion is then what actually happened, right? And sometimes your hypothesis is correct, and sometimes your hypothesis is incorrect, right? Just like theoretical and experimental. Sometimes it's exact, sometimes they're the same, sometimes they're not the same. Does that make sense? Okay? So, how you solve them is you take out, your bottom is your total. On top, on your videos, those juniors who watch, it was the number of wins, right? Do you guys remember that? He always called it number of wins over total. So this is what you want. I call it what you want over the total. Okay, did you want heads? Well, then you would put heads up there. Okay. So, for example, you sell 5 cupcakes with sprinkles and 5 without. What is the probability that the next cupcake sold has sprinkles? 50%, right? 50%? What type of probability is this? Experimental. The theoretical probability would be you have 60 cupcakes with sprinkles, you have 40 without. What's the probability? So this was actually how many sold, so it's experimental. If they told you what the total that they had in the case was, that would be your theoretical. You guys see the difference? No? Okay. So let's say experimental is happening right now, or based off of what has happened. Okay? So this would be experimental. It's based out of what has happened. Okay, theoretical would be you have all these cupcakes what's the probability of people coming in and buying them? Whereas this, you already sold them. And it's based on your sales. Okay. This one's not the best. Like coins and cards are easier. Okay. You roll a die. What is the probability that the number is less than 4? Okay. So it's less than 4. So if we get 4, is that less than 4? No. So what numbers work? 1, 2, 3. How many sides are on a die? 6. So what's the probability that it's going to be less than 4? 50%. Did we actually roll our die? No. So this one is theoretical. Yes. It doesn't. If you don't actually do something, it's theoretical. Okay? If you actually do something, then it's experimental.
How would you make this one?
You would flip a coin, or you would roll a die.
Oh, it would say right there.
Yep. So you'd say, you rolled a die, you got this many 1s, this many 2s, 3s, 4s, 5s, 6s. What's the chance, based on your experiment, what's the probability? Okay?
Yeah.
Other questions? So today it's just going to be a bunch of questions of, here's what it says, is it theoretical or experimental? Okay? Any questions about that? All right. So 3.4, it should say worksheet here. Ooh, that's not worksheet. Is your assignment.